Good morning. Welcome to SOGCast number 45. This production of SOGCast is brought to you courtesy of Jocko Willing Productions and his technical staff, and we're joined today, of course, by Chad, our favorite technician. My name is John Stryker-Meyer. I will be your host today. And I want to start off with a section from the book Uncommon Valor, and we have a story of a recon team that was on the ground. RT California was October 20th and 1969. They were on the ground and they had been hit by enemy fire. The 1-2 Stubbs was killed in action by gunfire in the initial assault. 3 of the Montagnards were wounded by AK-47 fire. Dick Gross, who was the 1-0, the team leader, was hit in the neck by RPG shrapnel. They spent the rest of the day evading and hiding with survivors until the A-1 Skyraiders helped over the extraction choppers that pulled RT California out. And John Blau and RT New York was sent in for a bright light the next morning. But again, the critical factor here, that team was in trouble, and it wasn't until the Skyraiders, the old A-1 Skyraider propeller-driven plane, arrived on the scene, and Stubbs was never recovered. But that mission is one day in SOG. Today we're going to focus on a critical mission that was January 5th, 1970 with RT Vermont, which led to the team leader, Franklin Doug Miller, being the recipient of the Medal of Honor for actions on this day. But a crucial part of that story spun around A-1 Skyraider support of that recon team. And today, for the first in our SOGcast interviews, we have a live Skyraider pilot, Don Engebretsen, with us today. Don, welcome to the show.
Engebretsen.
You sure?
Yes.
And see, this lady...
I shouldn't be particular about it because I'm used to that.
Well, no, I've only been mispronouncing it for 10 years now.
No problem. I am so honored to be here. I cannot tell you what it means to me to have supported SOG troops. I think you will find in the history of the Air Force close air support that we did some of the best work maybe ever in that time frame with those Skyraiders.
Well, again, for anybody that's listened to any of our previous SOGcasts, every SOGcast that's ever written from and broadcast with SOG teams on the ground, every one at some point, except for the missions in Cambodia in the early days of 68 and 69, have Skyraider support. It's critical, that close air support, and we'll get some more of the dynamics about how the Air Force never really supports close air support. Like we ground pounders would prefer them to be a higher priority, but anyways, it worked. And from my personal experience, I've got several times when, had it not been for the Skyraiders breaking an enemy attack around our perimeter, we wouldn't have gotten out. So I'm here today courtesy of the Skyraiders and the other aviators that supported us. And I want to, if you allow me, I want to turn just a little bit to that day with RT Vermont, where Sergeant Frank Miller was the 1-0 on the ground. And he had 2 previous tours of duty in Vietnam with the 1st Cav, and then during after those tours of duty, he was in Special Forces. He was at CCC Khartoum, and during that time, Miller was picked to be the 1-0. He picked his Montagnards carefully, and this is based on their skill and their strength and their abilities on the ground. And RT Vermont was an aggressive team, and it was John Plaster has written about that in his books. And today's mission, again, from the book Uncommon Valor by Steve Moore, and this chapter 21 is on the Vietnamese Alamo, and you'll see why that title sticks. And on that day, Miller was on the ground. He had his 1-1 was Robert Brown, and the 1-2, the radio operator, was Ed Blythe. and they had 4 of the indigenous Montagnards on that team. And it's a critical part of the story. And on top of that day, that mission, several other teams have been inserted into this area of operations, and it was in Cambodia, which at that point, we had never had Skyraider support there. But on this day, they did. The team was in the ground, and RT Vermont was inserted. They moved away from the main LZ, and as they moved, they were crossing a trail which had a tripwire on it. And the 3rd or 4th Montagnard across it didn't take seriously the tripwire. He thought it was there for the wrong reason. Anyway, he activated it. When it exploded, it wounded several members on the team. So the team was already wounded before they make any enemy contact. And at some point, the team is on the ground. Now they're in enemy contact. And at some point, when did you first get involved, and how you learn about the team, and what is the situation that you're first told? And at that point, you were a 2-man squadron. If you could explain the logistics a little bit on that. And then we'll come back after we talk about the action scene and explain about the unique unit, OLA, OLAA, which is unique in Air Force history in and of itself.
Okay, I was a pilot at OLA. It was a small unit. We only had 10 airplanes and 12 pilots. And this day I was on alert. I had been in country now for about 3 months, and on the 5th of January I was flying with another lieutenant who was a new flight lead, and I was the wingman. And we were called out. We had a bunk area in a building. We sat alert a lot, and a klaxon would go off, and we would set up the A1s early in the day, first light. Then we could lay around and relax or talk.
And then when you say set up, that means all the ordnance is put on the plane.
Yes.
All you need to do is jump into it, start it up.
Put your helmet on, we hang it off the side of the plane, jump in there, and get out of there as fast as we could.
And here's another interesting aspect. In Da Nang, where you gentlemen flew out of, what was the top priority for takeoffs at Da Nang? I mean, we have F-4 Phantom jets, commercial airliners, King Bees, South Vietnamese King Bees. Who had the top priority?
Busiest airport in the world by far.
At that time, in 1969,
yes.
It's 1970.
And our little unit was, go back in history, we evolved from the 6th, and then a new unit was formed, and we can talk about that later. So when we were cocking an airplane in the morning,
right,
then we would go and wait and see what we would be called for. We wouldn't know. We were required to have 2 flights every day. That's 4 airplanes for SOG. Then they also gave us search and rescue missions too. So we had to have another flight cocked to go search and rescue missions. And
the setups for each aircraft would be different for SAR.
Specific loading requirements.
Sure.
We developed our own tactics and our own specific loads based on the unit size we had to be able to switch over. If we were out on a SOG mission and there was a bad SAR, we could be called off of that SAR and be sent to our SOG mission and supplement. So we had loads that were kind of universal, and that we developed over time. So on this day, my lead, and myself were in a bunk area, and we got the klaxon, and we ran out to the airplanes, and that airplane was set up for a SOG load. A lot of CBU-25 and 2 cans of nape. And we didn't use rockets by then. We figured out rockets were too erratic.
The 2.75 rockets.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had a mind of their own sometimes. And one of the neat things about our unit is a small unit. Our commander, Jim Wold, was a wonderful guy, and he listened to us. I don't ever remember him talking to us on a podium. We sat in circles and developed our own tactics. So this day now, we're scrambled. I don't know where we're going. He doesn't. This is another thing that will shock some people. We didn't really know where we were going often. It's a lot of jungle and everything. That's what forward air controllers were for.
Yeah, again,
they would know their specific areas.
They'd be over the team.
Yes.
And they knew what they needed. They would call you. You guys would respond to the fact. But meanwhile, you would just respond to where they told you to go.
Exactly. And the Covey rider would ride with these forward air controllers. This one happened to be an O2, so it's a side-by-side propeller aircraft.
Yeah, push-pull aircraft,
Yeah.
which was the standard Covey, which is the code name for a fact for SOG missions. And the Covey rider was an experienced Green Beret who had been on the ground. He was riding with the Air Force pilot, and then he would be the person in contact with the team on the ground.
Absolutely. And this day, John LaHecka was that Covey pilot, and Zumbrin, I remember his first name, was the Covey rider.
Right.
An excellent Army personnel person.
Sure.
And very experienced, and only select people were able to do that job. John Plaster and others, did this
Of legend, yes.
Covey riders. And so all we know is we run out to the plane and we jump in the plane, and we were supposed to head for the tri-border area and rendezvous with the FAC. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I didn't know whether we were in, I knew we were in the area of the tri-border area.
Yeah.
But we were actually going pretty deeply into Cambodia.
Sure.
And that was a no-no, but we didn't know that. Neither one, because it was just, we rendezvous with the FAC, and then we start getting a briefing. On this day, we were sent down there for a spin down. And that was a team that was in danger, and it was a prairie fire emergency when they called us to come. We were now at Da Nang, not at Pleiku anymore, and so we had a little distance to go. And by the time we got down there, we were informed that spin down, there was another Covey FAC and another rider. They informed us that spin down had managed to get a little distance in the jungle. And if I understand it correctly, if you guys get about 10 feet in the jungle, sometimes you got the separation. And they broke away from the prairie fire emergency.
Right.
So now what is going on? What are we going to be doing? And we're talking about that with the other FAC. And then we get this additional prairie fire emergency. And it sounded really,
dire,
pitched voice, and this was a no crapper.
Oh yeah.
And they needed us right away. And it wasn't too far away that we were going to meet up now with a new FAC, the LaHecka and Zumbrin
Jim Zumbrin.
Okay, and both great guys.
Yeah.
And I've learned later. But we don't know these guys. I mean, we're just...
Right. And what you didn't know was that at that point, Miller and his team had been in heavy contact. They had moved, and when they had moved, they left literally a blood trail.
Yes.
As they moved from where they had that explosive device, the tripwire that hit the team. And the medic was patching up people. Brown was patching up people as they went along. And they made contact, and they had devastating automatic fire, and the team was literally fighting for its life.
Later, I learned it was estimated that they thought a platoon, but maybe even a larger force.
Right.
And so they left, and I know you guys never wanted to do this, but they left. There were blood trails. There was equipment left behind. The enemy heard the blast, and they get, from what I'm told, they get zoned in, and it's when they're on you, they're going to be on you, and they see these signs. This creek, basically, at that time, I've talked to Joe Parnar in the past. He's been through that same area.
Yeah.
And wading up to his chest or more, just barely able to cross.
And again, the team had moved down a mountainside, and then that explosion goes off. They continue down, but they're near that creek.
They actually crossed. They were on one side of the creek, and they crossed over the creek, which was about 2 feet deep at the time.
Right.
When they got on the other side, Miller went into the defensive mode immediately and started to pick them off. And one of the yards that was later was killed. So it was a 7-man team.
Right.
And one of the yards was doing a great job of picking them off, and they were keeping them at abeyance for a while.
Right.
And the terrain on the other side of the creek, this would be the eastern side. This is a creek ran north-south. And the rest of the team was at different positions. I know that Ed Blythe, I actually met him many years later. And by the way, I should interject something here. We were the same silence that you guys had. We were 20 years go to prison if we talked.
Yeah, we all signed NDAs, non-disclosure agreements.
We didn't have to sign. We were officers. They could take our word for it.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm so proud to tell you that our unit never talked, any of us, publicly for 40 years before we finally learned about SOAR and everything. And I had a lot to do with that. But,
and we'll talk, because here's that unique aspect of war that we don't talk about much. A team is on the ground, in contact, in Laos or Cambodia, and there's Air Force units, Army, Marine Corps units, all coming to support the team on the ground. And I'm alive today thanks to that courage of the aviators and our little people that are on the ground. But you never come back to say thank you.
We didn't know each other.
So, and then also,
I never met a SOG guy while I was there.
No.
A LERP guy and a Mike Forces a little bit, but and that was at Pleiku.
Sure.
And at Da Nang, nobody knew that we existed.
So I want to we'll talk more about this, because again, this is the team now. It's been under siege, and this is going back to Steve Moore's book, which is the sound of A-1 Skyraiders arriving overhead was like an answered prayer for the recon team. The Da Nang base Ola, operational location Alpha Alpha, we'll talk more about that later, SPADs were already in the area, and they were coming to the scene. And again, we talk about you and First Lieutenant Jim Scythe. And the 1-0 Miller is being careful because they want to make sure they mark their position. And so there's some question back and forth about it being marked. And again, returning to the book, apparently Engebretsen was the only aerial observer who saw the small waffling smoke rising from the high, dense foliage, defining the V that marked the on-scene riverbed. And so this is like, you're hearing other things, other people, but your eyesight focused on that. And that was where you had to put, and from your doing research, how did that smoke get there, first of all? And even that's like, holy shit phenomenon.
I haven't talked about this publicly ever. It's complicated. And I usually don't divulge any names about what I was there, but that's fine. What happened was we were being briefed on the way over.
Sure.
This wasn't too far to go.
Right.
And things were happening fast.
And you can monitor the FM frequency with a team on the ground.
And I am a poor listener. I'll be the first person to admit it. So I had my helmet so tight around my ears so I could listen to 3 radios at one time. One time my head would be throbbing all the time. We'd be out there for 4 hours and my head's One time I took my helmet off for about 2 seconds and the noise was ungodly. I've built engines in my life. The noises and rattling. I couldn't wait to get the darn thing back on my head.
We're talking about the noise of an A-1 Skyraider.
It is a very unpleasant existence in the cockpit of the airplane. And so now we're going and we're getting instructions. And I'm listening to all three radios. And I do hear the team, some of the screaming and things that are going on.
Yeah.
And Ed Blythe was on a Prick 25, I believe, is the radio that he had. And I could tell it was desperate. And I heard them talking, and the forward air controller, John Laheka, he made a very good mark with a rocket. Rockets are not exacting, and they can be erratic, but it was a close mark. But I saw that in my awards. They indicate that that's what I saw. I did see it.
Yeah.
However, I also was listening and heard about the Willie Pete chest packet, which maybe was a grenade. I don't know exactly. I know that Miller threw grenades in to keep the enemy at abeyance on the other side of the creek. They're fighting for that ground,
right?
And they don't want the bad guys on the other side of the creek. And it wasn't that big an area. So I could hear the talking, and I heard them as I'm going to fly in, and their river. There's no river. We don't see any river.
Not until you get right on it.
No, we never saw the creek or the river because the vegetation, I don't know, in Cambodia, I'd say at least 100-foot high trees and maybe more than that.
Sure.
Probably not 2 or 3.
We're talking northern Cambodia, which still carried over the very similar
it could have been 200
to
feet.
what you had in Laos, right?
And this comes into play.
Absolutely.
And so now as I'm looking, I see his mark. I hear them talking on the radio about Miller's wanting the Willie Pete's, and he throws that Willie Pete down to Miller. And he's on much higher ground, and maybe he heaved it 15 feet or whatever.
Right.
And Miller looked back at him. Blythe told me, I actually went to dinner with him, and he was very cautious to talk to me. And he said Miller gave him the longest look, like,
in the middle of a
You
firefight.
threw this Willie Pete down to me? And then he took that and he threw it into the creek.
And you could hear that on the
I
FM
heard
radio.
That.
Yeah.
Next thing now, can I see this? It's not as much Willie Pete as a rocket would be. The rocket had more smoke, but I saw the little whiffs of smoke coming out in the nearby area, and I knew where that was then. But it's more complicated because I'm at altitude. I'm looking down at trees.
And you're going over 100 plus miles an hour.
130, 40 miles an hour.
And you're the wingman to the squadron leader.
And so we're going in at an angle, to the southeast.
This is all milliseconds happening.
It is. It is hard to explain what you're
doing a good job. Keep going.
Okay. And so I did see the Willie Pete.
Yeah.
I also could tell where the river would be because you can see the trees forming that V.
Right.
And I'm lining up with that, and I'm hearing that they're going across the creek. For some reason, my lead that day, which I won't never know exactly, he displaced himself far west of where the creek was.
Yeah.
And it was a V. The higher terrain as we were flying south was off to our left side.
Yeah.
And there were karst up there and everything. And later on, we learned from a helicopter pilot, we'll get into that later, that they saw Chinese people in this area. There were a lot of bad guys there. And Nixon at that time was diverting B-52s into Cambodia. So things were starting to get...
This is a top secret operation that was not told about until many years later.
They would split off some of the B-52s to go do that and let the others go up there and not, and I believe SOG teams went in after B-52 arc lights were done. So
and then just for the record, in 68 and 69, SOG teams were forbidden to have cover from any fixed wing. It was strictly helicopter coverage.
In Cambodia.
In Cambodia. So at this point, you're like, all that other history's there, and you you don't really care about where you are. Right now, you're on a mission. The fact tells you to go here. You're seeing this. And I think that, the team is in, your squad leader goes in with Run, who's apparently drifting from what you know as the point and the smoke that came from the recon team that needs the ordnance on that smoke.
That is absolutely correct. And he was far displaced away from that. And he was in front of me.
Yeah.
And now we're paralleling the river, the creek, and I see him out in front of me, and I'm listening to and I see the smoke, and I'm armed up. I'm going to drop CBUs.
Which are cluster bomb units.
Yes, and these will roll out the back of tubes. They weighed about 9 pounds each. And we had the good CBUs. There was another variety of those that was more like a Dole juice can.
Right.
And with fins on it, but they would blow up in the trees and not blow up. And the enemy would use those for booby traps and
sure.
if they didn't blow up. Our CBUs were, whoever invented this was brilliant. They had veins on them. It's about the size of a hardball baseball
right.
in tubes. They roll out the back, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but and we could drop 1 tube at a time. We could drop a canister of 9 tubes. We had all, and it was,
which could be several hundred at some point.
A lot,
yeah.
But also a very complicated system to set up your ordnance drops so you didn't make mistakes and drop off the wrong thing.
Right.
So all this is going through my mind, and I'm calculating, and I see this, and I'm dropping, and my lead's out in front of me, and then I saw him jinking, and I'm looking at the plane like I'm overhead of it. I'm pointing it out, and I see the helmet on his head, and I hear him, and he says, pull off, don't drop.
Right, and then we can go to the book here because Steve Moore captured this with how he did it.
Absolutely.
He says, "Do not drop." You got that part. Engebretsen, however, was roaring in only 20 feet above the treetops, which reached nearly 100 feet into the Cambodian sky. The shouts of Blythe to "put it right on us" were still ringing in his ears as his section leader shouted him to abort his run. Engebretsen had less than a second to decide which way to react, and he opted to risk his career to answer the frantic pleas of the Green Berets below. He dumped a partial load of CBU-25 bomblets right over the treetops, where the smoke was rising from. Covey pilot John LaHecka noted intense enemy gunfire exploding from several hillside locations as the propeller-driven fighter zoomed through the fire zone. As he pulled out, Engebretsen heard shouting and screams from various men over the team's radio. This is on FM, which must have been left open. His head began swimming with apprehension momentarily as he feared that his ordnance had landed directly on the Green Beret team. He was hoping that he is saved. "I'm screwed," he thought. "I hit them." So what was that moment? I mean, time expansion. A second now turns into, must feel like hours for you. In that moment, you dump the CBU-25. You hear on the FM. What was that like, Don? That moment.
Proudest moment of my life.
And fearsome. I mean, you're in the back of your mind. It's like, oh shit factor.
I have literally seconds, if it was even that.
Yeah.
And I'm told not to drop. I know where they are. I know where he dropped it. Wasn't going to work for the team. Maybe he'd have killed 1 million guys on the side of the hill, but that wasn't why we were there. So now I have a big decision, and I thought, screw it, and I dropped.
Yeah.
Now, unbeknownst to him, Blythe had keyed the mic on the Prairie.
Oh, of course.
Radio. And I'm hearing this screaming. I'm hearing my ordnance going off. It's chaos. And I'm screwed. I'm thinking I'm screwed. and I am. This is the end of my career. This is the end of my life, as I would know it.
Yeah.
And nobody in the world would have probably ever heard that radio call. Maybe I can get Elon Musk to go out there and find it for me sometime
Someday
and bring
he'll
it
do
back.
yeah.
But and there was a noise and screaming, and I think.
And meanwhile, you're pulling out. You can hear all this.
I'm actually flying. I didn't jink. I flew to get behind my lead.
Right.
And so I was a little bit of time there to think about this. And about the time I thought it's over for me,
Right.
I heard, "Do it again."
Yes.
Do
so
it
here,
again.
let's go back to the radio because
Yes.
this is Blythe. Do it again. Do it again. Engebretsen's delivery had hit the NVA solidly and inflicted heavy loss. Blythe continued hollering for the Spads to hit the enemy again. Tail gunner James U.B. later related to Engebretsen that his ordnance had erupted a scant 20 feet from his position and no more than 100 from that of Blythe. But the devastation to the NVA was severe enough that the recon men asked for more of the same. Blythe estimated that the Spads ordnance reduced the enemy's ground fire by at least 2/3, and he noted that the enemy counter fire was reduced significantly from those first offensive runs. Oh my God.
Thanks to you, and you know how I ended up being at SOAR and bringing some of my guys. We were the first A1 pilots that ever went out there that had supported you.
Yeah, again, so just for the background for our listeners, we're talking about the Special Operations Association reunions, and back when some knucklehead was president of the SOA, from I think it was 2012. And I got a phone call from the membership chairman, Ray Calvo, going, "Hey, there's some A1 Skyraider pilots that said they supported SOG. You ever heard of something called OLA?" I'm going, "No, is that a margarine?" I said, "No, it's an Air Force unit."
Well, let's talk about that later because I can tell you because it was quite a. But to meet you and all, but I also I had sent a. I've been quiet. I didn't talk about this mission. And Robert No, I found him on a website.
Right. That led to the reunion.
It led to a lot of things. And I sent out an email that I had phoned this mission and I had questions about it and I wondered if anybody knew anything about it. Little did I know he was going to send this to everybody on his email group. And I'm going, my phone rings. I can't do a deep voice, but I don't know anything about your mission. I don't know anything about you. I just want in my life to thank a bad pilot.
Amen.
I'm getting emotional.
Well, that's okay. I want to get back to that mission that day.
Just real quick, and then that's how I ended up back out there. And I got calls, I got invites. One of the guys called and said, "We're helping UB." And UB
is a Montagnard from the team.
Yes,
that
and
day.
that he's going to be at this reunion.
Yeah.
And they were paying money for his expenses because of getting it back from Vietnam and all. And I donated to that. My wife and I did. And I met UB in a hotel room.
No.
And I went up and interviewed him. I never got it all transcribed. Just real quickly, though, in that conversation, he let me know he was scattered. They were scattered more than I would have any way of knowing.
Yeah.
But they also knew it was coming. And the way this ordnance worked, it was brilliant. It would spin arm to a certain revolution, and that would arm it. It would go off when it slowed down to a slower revolution. So it
meaning after it had fallen out.
After it fell out, the spinning makes it arm, and then it may hit tree trunks and it may bounce around. It may do all of these other things and it was so effective because now it is exploding on the ground.
Absolutely.
And it's not getting caught in the trees. It's not even really ricocheting too much, but it was no exacting.
Allow me to have an editorial footnote.
Please.
Having been the recipient of that, close air support with CBU-25s. When they hit, it's like a mini arc light going off, and the flechettes come out that are devastating to the enemy that they're on. And in this case, you were so close that a couple people may have had some injuries on the good guy's side, but
I don't think I hit anybody for some reason, but but UB said I was right on the creek. But it's first of all, when you drop the CB, you have to understand this too. The spinning action causes it to drift.
Right.
And for every 25 feet that you're in the air, it goes 3 feet to the right. That was in my calculation when I said I can drop right over this thing. Do I know the trees are 200 feet, 100 feet? I don't.
You don't.
But I know there is a drift factor, and I played that. It was just, I don't know. It's
that
subconscious
yeah.
that I was experienced enough at that time to be confident, and I dropped. And now, I like I said, I was born again in the sense that, I was relieved, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the next time my flight lead went out and flew some very large bomber pilot patterns. His call.
He did that, but meanwhile, let's get back to the citation for you.
Please.
So we're quoting. By the way, this is a quoting from a Silver Star citation that was put in after this mission for Don. And in it, of course, they talk about the lethal small arms and automatic weapons fire from the enemy at the aircraft. And despite the intense enemy gunfire, Lieutenant Engebretsen rolled in for a second pass on the same heading and again dropped his ordnance at treetop level to assure precise delivery. The fact, again, called enemy gunfire pointed this out on numerous positions. Lieutenant Engebretsen made 6 more passes, each one an exact duplicate of the first 2, knowingly exposing himself again and again to the enemy ground fire as he drove his aircraft over the target on the same single run-in heading. Finally, the enemy was forced to break contact, and the SPADs, with very little ordnance remaining, orbited over the area. The team, their mobility hampered by the wounds, used this opportunity to move to a landing zone. My God.
Well, I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit.
That's why we're
too.
here.
Okay. So the second pass, now I'm following my lead.
Yeah.
That's what I'm supposed to do and supposed to do what he's asking me to do. And he's very wide, big pattern. I'm thinking, I can get right back on these guys. I can just spin. I can just do a big whifferdale, come back right on them. No, we're flying out this huge bomber pattern, and it's straight and level, and there was a lot of ground fire. I just put it out of my mind. And so and I didn't even really see ground fire, to be honest with you. The nice thing about being in the jungle environment is the enemy being low, they have holes in the trees and noise they can shoot at, but they can't really, they don't get a long time to track you.
Right, particularly at 130 miles an hour.
Yes. And so in our speed that we try to get as much as we could out of when the plane was heavily loaded, they were pigs. And so I followed him around, and this time he dropped, and we were dropping according to Zumbrun's instructions,
right?
Relayed by the FAC. And so this was 2 500-pound napalms. Now they don't drift.
No.
And they tumble and they come down and splatter. And so I made a little bit of a calculation there. But the hardest part was to find where that little smoke was again.
Yeah.
It's all trees. It's just, you can't. And I somehow came up with, I don't recall exactly what it was, that I could get back to that same spot. And Ed Blythe confirmed with me when I met him that the napes, he told me the ground fire was unbelievable on my first pass. He said when I came back for the second pass with the napalm, it had been reduced significantly. and the napes quieted it down a lot. And for the other passes.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, we were then instructed after those runs, because now the team's ready to move, and you can read if you want about that.
I will, but another quick question here.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, you're the first tactical air supporting the team. Had any other gunships arrived yet? It was just you and the team.
At that point in time, I don't know what's going on underneath there. There were gunships out there from the 57th, and then there were, from Camp Holloway, there were Cobra gunships supporting them.
Right.
I don't know that. Later I learned that. So, and they would take more time to move in.
Sure.
And you'll probably be reading. But so after those passes were done, in the meantime, Miller's starting to move. He needs to go. The LaHeca found a crater, a 20-foot diameter crater. I learned later, I had no idea how, because Ed Blythe kept telling me, Dad, I got to send you pictures. We can't move very fast in this jungle. And so it was 150 meters away. There was an opening from that bomb to allow a helicopter to maybe have a shot at getting in there. Yeah. And so we're put off and holding. There were also two Misty Facts out there, fast mover F-100s.
That's only a fact, though.
Yeah, they had ordnance. They could drop on things. They carried ordnance. There were two guys. It was a two-seater, one's to look, and they used them for a lot of different things. And they were pretty crazy guys and did a lot of interesting things. But they didn't want to dare have any jets go in there, because the facts learned you can't rely on the speed and the other factors.
For close air support like that, you're delivering.
They held and left later, is all I know about that. So now we are in a holding pattern, and then you can go ahead, please.
Yeah, because then there was a final pocket of enemy that continued resistance to the fire at any aircraft within range, driving off any helicopters attempting a pickup. Intense ground fire was coming from a gorge 20 meters from the wounded team on a line between the other two friendly teams. The run-in heading carried directly over one team, and it was on a line, the second only 50 meters away. Any error in delivery would have been disastrous. With this in mind, Lieutenant Engebretsen dove his Skyraider to treetop level, unable to jinx a change his heading in the slightest way. His ordnance exploded exactly on target. The enemy broke contact, and the helicopters made a quick pickup in that bomb crater that you were just talking about. And again, this is according to the Silver Star citation that was submitted on your behalf. The Spads had been on target for over 2.5 hours. The wounded ground commander confirmed that from his hospital bed that the Spads had drilled over 50 enemy soldiers, probably more, and broken the assault on the outnumbered team. Lieutenant Engebretsen's courageous and aggressive attack on the face of intense small enemy and automatic fire at absolute minimum altitudes. I mean, treetop doesn't get any more minimum than that. And with complete disregard for his own safety, completely disorganized the enemy ground force and rendered their attack ineffective. The lives of the already wounded Free World forces were saved by the accurate Spad strike. By his gallantry and devotion to duty, Lieutenant Engebretsen has reflected great credit upon himself and the U.S. Air Force. Amen. What a target, but 2.5 hours.
I could go for 2.5 hours. So let me elaborate a little bit.
Please, that's why we're here.
What we're holding, and they're trying to get organized. Miller had made a foray to the crater.
Right.
He was, and picking people off and trying to see what could they get to this crater. Then he came back. He's got all these wounded guys. They're hobbling. They're working their way to get to this. Now, I've learned this all later from other sources, and I kept my mouth shut till now, basically.
Indeed.
And so what was going on then is they were trying to get their forces to the crater and get them recovered. I didn't realize this until more recently. Bobby Ross was one of the helicopter. He was the co-pilot on the helicopter that was the first chopper to go in. I think it was Higginbottom was the commander of that, if I've got that correctly. And I didn't talk to him until 50 years later on the anniversary. I called Ed Blythe, and I got a hold of him because, unfortunately, sadly, Bobby Ross had died.
Yes, sir.
And but Bobby told me they saw Chinese people on the karsts and in this area, that the area was extremely hot, and there were a lot of bad guys. There were 7 teams out there trying to figure all this stuff out. And thanks to Joe Parnar for knowing about coordinates and stuff because of running recon, Bobby Ross had mission stuff in his helmet. He found years later. He actually had the privilege of meeting Doug Franklin as well.
Yeah.
And
Frank Miller.
Or Frank Miller, excuse me.
Yeah.
And Franklin Douglas Miller, or whatever it is.
That's it.
And so he had he had him come to one of their 57th gatherings, and he sent me information from that. He was very valuable to me and informing me, and I can't talk about it, and I don't know anything. In 40 years, none of us, nobody knew what our unit did.
Sure.
We were amazingly quiet, and so I learned more about what is happening. So now I'm holding. We still have some ordnance left. I don't really actually recall what we had left. And then I get a contact from Laheka via Zumbran, because Zumbran's in charge, basically.
Sure.
And they want me to go in. Only on the 50th, when I talked to Higginbottom, did I learn that I thought I had gone in and the helicopters came in after me. No, what really had happened was when they got to the crater, 20-foot crater, and
right.
They immediately, that helicopter with Bobby Ross went in with Higginbottom, and I think I've got that name right, and they immediately got 40 holes in their helicopter.
Wow.
The enemy was waiting for them, and all 40 holes, and Doug Miller yelled at him, screamed at him, "Get the F out of here, get out of here," and waved them off. Now he's got problems. He's done his own forays, from what I understand, keeping the enemy at abeyance.
He's got the team in the crater.
Team's in the crater. Bobby Ross did say something that on that first pass in, they had taken an NVA body, put him face up in the crater, and freaked them out when they come into the helicopter to try to make this attempt. They're getting holes through their plane, and they're looking at this dead gook on the bottom of the crater. And it's like, I wish I could make this stuff up.
You can't.
And
yeah.
so so now they're in real trouble.
Right.
The enemy's gathering forces, and they sent Brown, medic.
The medic, yes, sir.
There was a medic that was being brought in, Andrew Brown.
A separate medic from Bob Brown, who's already on the team on the ground.
Okay, so
yeah.
What's going on in the interim while we're waiting is they're gathering their stuff together. So they had a team to go in and rescue, and they put them in generally close to the area. And they asked Andrew Brown to run through a clearing to get to the team faster, because rather than use the jungle foliage to guide them or to protect them, to work around. And he did it with 4 Montagnards. And I've heard people badmouth Andrew, but no, I believe every word he told me. He also has Alzheimer's, and he has sadly deteriorated, the last I know, quite a bit. So now...
So all the while, you're circling.
We're just circling.
Waiting
This is all coming to...
Yes.
And then they decided, after Miller had the helicopter go away,
after 40
something has to
holes.
be done.
Right.
And they got me, only me. I was advised that I could go in. I had to drop. If I would be short, there were going to be banners. I never saw any damn banner. There's a team that's displaced closer that I have to fly over.
Right.
And then the other, if I was long, I might have hurt the people coming in from
Sure.
the other team.
Yeah.
And Andrew Brown ran up on the knoll that Franklin Miller was on, and he had been wounded. There's different versions about this. I know he had a wound in his arm and a chest wound. I'm told by some people that that chest wound wasn't as deep as it would have been dead if he had taken a round in
Sure.
the chest. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, the fact is, he got there. He was wounded en route. That's a miracle to even get to the crater.
He was wounded and hurt it too, and so he had. Now he was stacking ammo. We all know what that means. This is the last.
We're back to Miller now.
Miller.
Right.
And
he tells the helicopter to go away. Andrew Brown and his 4 yards able to get in to help patch up the wounded.
2 yards never seen again. Didn't go with him. They went around and they never saw him again.
Or they could have been killed in action.
They probably were. I don't know.
Yeah.
And Miller they never knew. And so now, when they ask me to go in, I've had 2 times in my career over there where you get so focused, so intense, for me at least.
Yeah.
You don't think. You only act from instinct. And I had to find them. I got some guidance from the fact. I know that I saw them. Andrew Brown told me that he looked over the side where the enemy was. They were swarming on the bottom side of the hill. And he said that it was over. And this A1 came and blew the MFers away. And that was me. I know that.
Wow.
I don't remember that. I'll
Sure.
be candid about it. It was just you.
And as we just described in the citation, that gun run, that last run you made while they're in the bomb crater, broke their back. It gave them enough time to get the helicopters in now.
Back in.
To extract the team.
Everything I've said was verified by Ed Blythe. I went to dinner with him. He was he lived in Portland, and after the first SOAR. And I met with him. He was very guarded. His biggest regret, he was a big guy, and his biggest regret in life was that he never went back. It hurt him deeply. I don't even know if he's still alive. Jason Hardy told me he didn't think he was still alive. I haven't tried to contact him in a while.
Right.
And he very reluctantly, we warmed up to each other.
Sure.
And then he started telling me a lot more.
Yeah.
So, and he kept telling me, Don, I kept saying, no, I couldn't have done that. And he said, no, you did that. And he said, we were all dead if it wasn't for you. I don't even know how to deal with that now. I get emotional about it.
Well, how can you not? I mean, this is like the other side of the story. We never hear from the pilots that are flying these A1 Skyraiders that we loved. I mean, the guys on the ground loved it. And here, again, 2.5 hours over a team.
Okay.
You broke those attacks time after time. Now you're low on ordnance. And for the last time, the helicopters can't get in. The first one that goes in gets 40-plus bullet holes.
Yep.
And they get Don, or whatever your code name was, one more time, and there's other teams around, have to be specific on point with the ordnance, or you're going to inflict friendly casualties, which we try to avoid if at all possible. And you did it. You broke the back, helicopters come in, and that is one day in SOG, January 5th, 1970, and hats off to you, by the way, sir.
Let me add a few more things.
And then we're going to move on to some other stories,
Okay,
because believe it or not,
I can
there was a
lie all
long
day.
secret war that you guys fought in.
It's interesting I spoke with Ed Blythe on the 50th
Yeah.
again, and he described, I kept telling him, are you sure? Are you sure? He said, and he actually went out in the jungle and or in parts of Portland to show me how difficult it was to maneuver around in this kind of vegetation that you guys did on a regular basis. And then he told me that he said I asked him, how did you get on your helicopters? And he said, Don, it was chaos. There was no order. And he said, it was just people getting on a chopper and getting out of there. And there were like 4 of them. And he said all he could see was these tail rotors sticking way up in the air. And he couldn't understand it. And he thought they were crashing and everything. And I had to explain to him that if a helicopter wants to get away, not up, that rotor has to be way up, tail rotor, and it's pulling himself away from where they are as fast as it could. And he didn't understand that. And so we both enlightened each other about quite a few things, and that's pretty much it. And I kept my mouth shut. And I also will say that the document that you were reading from for my award was complicated too.
Yeah, there's always complications.
Because I had to make a decision before Christmas whether I was going to stay in the Air Force or not. And I had gone over there. I didn't want to fly the A-1.
This is Christmas 1969, before the January 5th, 1970 mission, just to add to your complication factor
I
here.
did not, in pilot training, I'll get to that a little later, but I did not want to fly an A-1.
Yeah.
My flight commander, training guy, flew A-1s, and he was talking about how great they were. He was part Indian, American Indian.
Well, you know what? If we're at that point in the story, let's just start from the beginning then, because you becoming a pilot, because there's some funny stories here even about...
Okay. Let me just say this one, and then I'll go back to that. He said, you got to see, 2 Marine... I was lucky to get Williams Air Force Base for my pilot training as a most desired base, and usually the academy guys went there.
And where is it?
In Williams, Arizona.
Arizona, okay.
Yeah, outside of Phoenix.
Sure.
And so 2 Marine A-1s came in. And
while you're there doing your training, and you wanted to be
guys are saying, "Hey, there's some A-1s out in the ramp."
And you wanted to be a jet jockey, right?
Absolutely. And I walk out there and I see these big blue things, and they're leaking oil all over the ramp, and I know I'm high in my pilot training class.
Yeah.
And I was picking they made us say, you want fighters, you want transports. They always were playing games.
Near the end of your training. So you want to pick
and I
what
wanted
you want
to fly fighters.
Okay.
I wanted to fly a F-104 or F-105 or whatever, but I wasn't.
What about F-4 Phantoms?
That's what I wanted, one of them. But I couldn't get it because we didn't, only backseaters in our class.
Whoa.
We only had 4 that were fighters, quote unquote. 1 F-100, 1 A-37, and 2 A-1s. And I was picking the third choice. And I was so hoping that the guy that could have had the A-1, the second guy, would take that and I would get the A-37. That's how stupid I was. And it worked out. So I'm getting the A-1.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, okay, I'll go over and I'll do 2 tours because I want to fly jets. And I go to pilot training, go to that training. I'll get to that later. In life, when I grew up, my father passed away when I was 13 years old on the 4th of July.
Ooh.
and I had a family of 3. I was not thinking, I was married, a different first marriage, and I wasn't thinking at all about, I was going to school. I paid my own way for school. I had to provide a lot of food for my family. I worked from the time I was 10 and a half years old helping on paper routes.
Sure.
And I worked at Kroger's for the years. And I got married, and at that time that was, you weren't going to be drafted. Well, that changed. And I had okay grades, but I wasn't a great student. I was working 30 hours a week while I was going to school. And I had an interview with IBM, and I had met a fellow that had come back and was going through college on the GI Bill, Army. I don't know exactly what he did, but he seemed so much more mature than I was. And I kind of just parked that. But I basically was offered the IBM job and took it. But I had gone to the Air Force recruiter, and I said, he said, what do you want from the Air Force? And I said, well, I got a business degree. Maybe I could be a business major. He said, in the entire United States in the next year, we will need maybe 2 business people. Would you like to be a pilot? Huh? I said, what is that? He said, you have to take some tests and see if you can be a pilot. I've never been in an airplane in my life. At this time, I'm married. I haven't been thinking about being a pilot.
Right.
And long story, I went to Chanute, passed the physical. I didn't think I could see well enough, but obviously I could. And I quit. I had accepted the job. I came home from the physical. I went out and drank some beer because I wasn't worried about it. I have a job. And I passed all the physical. And one day in my life, I had 2 envelopes in the mailbox at the same time. One was my confirmation that I was now an IBM employee. And the other one is, you've been accepted to go to pilot training if you can go to officer candidate school first. Fork in the road. My wife and I both needed to get out of Wisconsin for a whole lot of reasons, family and other things. And I thought, I can always wear a black tie and a white shirt. And
right.
And let's
roll the dice.
And I went to pilot training. And so first I went to officer training school, and that's the way that's run. It's kind of interesting. The guys that were there 6 weeks in front of you now are in charge of you. And we had this big loudmouth in that class, and he said, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And he was so full of himself. And I remember one day at a parade, he was leading the parade because his class was graduating. He couldn't remember what to say. He yelled out, "Start the parade." We were all rolling on the ramp laughing. He didn't make it through pilot training. I did. I had a delay in my pilot training because I can't jump, but somehow I managed to jump high enough to tear up an ankle.
During a volleyball game?
Volleyball, with a few beers in me.
Of course.
And then I went...
or a few six-packs.
It wasn't that much, but it doesn't take much for me. So the doctor said, "You haven't done drugs, have you?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "You're getting morphine, and you are about to go on a trip." And I'll remember at the hospital at Williams Air Force Base, it could have wheeled me off a cliff, and I would have just gone, whee! So now I end up getting the A1 assignment, and when it came, and I go down, and my instructor was Stretch Balmus, who is quite a character. He was never going to be more than a captain, and they actually I didn't realize that you could retire as a captain, but he did. And he saw me coming you could see the stretch marks from my G suit, and he was eating lieutenants alive, and he had me for lunch, but I got through the training, and the next thing I know, I'm going to Pleiku, and to start my career. Unbeknownst to me, Pleiku Air Force Base was closing. on the 15th of November. They knew that before I even was there. The most I was going to ever do at Pleiku was going to be there for training, and then I was going to be going to Thailand. And that's exactly what I did. The base closed on the 15th of November. On the 1st of November, I was sent to go to Thailand as a Firefly, and which was a good unit. I had enough experience in my training. I liked it in country. I liked the smaller units and whatever. And so I was able to go there, and then I flew 5 flights, and the next thing I know, Jim Wold, who I didn't really know much before then, but he had flown with me a few times, and apparently
Now, he was a captain?
He was a lieutenant colonel. He was the highest ranking lieutenant colonel on the base at Pleiku.
Okay, very good.
And he was called to Thailand to form a new unit. And that is there's a lot of stuff. Steve Shermer gave me some information. It's really kind of strange how the Air Force thought that they could support the in-country AO missions with just pilots coming from all the way from Thailand. It's a long ways to get to tri-border from Thailand, so they would have had to displace ordnance for fuel. It would have taken them longer to get there. The DMZ, all of these areas that we've been operating in, all I did before the first time I left Pleiku was just fly hard bomb missions for 5 missions. And then I was sent off. So I had no close air support experience at all other than what I got in training. And I wasn't enthralled with being in Thailand, and I don't know why. And it seemed like getting me a party flight suit was more important than anything, and I flew 5 missions in the barrel roll. Unbeknownst to me, because of Kissinger, I believe, and Nixon, Steve Shermer gave me some paperwork that proved that the closing of Pleiku was not well known, and that if we didn't have SPADs in country anymore, 1970 was going to be a very, very poor year for you guys.
Right, absolutely.
And so it was reversed. And the JCS and I believe Nixon and Kissinger got these reports. They were signed by an Air Force officer, and I contacted him, our Air Force person, and I can be pretty bullheaded sometimes.
Blunt.
If I get on the target, I get the scent. And I got a hold of him, and he told me that he really signed it, yes, but he didn't really know much about it. And I believe that's the reason that Ray Calafell could never find out about me and all his other stuff, is the fact that that they realized the A-1 was the only airplane that could really support SOG teams properly.
Yeah, and at this point, too, I know that at other reunions, we've had Air Force commanders as well as retired 2-star Major General Jack Singlob. So one of the behind-the-scene battles that went on that we ground pounders never realized was the battle between Army and SOG to keep close air support such as the A-1s.
Absolutely.
Because it was vital. And that confirms what you're saying.
And I was right
Absolutely.
in the forefront of that thanks to Jim Wold coming up to Thailand, getting new orders, and the Air Force does some great air support did over there for the Army.
Right.
The Warthog would do all that. But in reality, it's kind of a situation where the Air Force will do it, but it's not their highest priority.
Right.
And so they wanted to Vietnamization, get numbers over in Thailand. We reversed that. And we being Jim Wold coming up. And there were 9 of us that were sent there and 2 before us. So 11 of the people from the 6 SOS that was closing had already moved to Thailand. And I was there for a total of 10 days and 5 missions. When Jim Wold, unbeknownst to me, I came back from a mission, my 5th mission, and from a barrel roll, and a major came out to meet me, and he acted like he was going to shoot my puppy, that I was going to be, in tears. He said, "You're going, I have bad news for you. You are going back in country to fight and back in country." And I remember thinking, I think I said to him, "When can I go? And can I fly my own plane over there?" And he looked at me like, "You want to leave this and go there?" And I did. And I then flew back with Bob Carr, who was happy to be going back. And Jim Wold and I flew a 3-ship back to Pleiku. And that's how I ended up in Pleiku. And that is how, unbeknownst to a lot of people, what would have been a disastrous year for SOG got a lot of relief, because we had Skyraiders at Pleiku again for a month, and then eventually all at Da Nang. The secrecy levels were so high that when I was being, I'm sorry, I think I touched my microphone. Okay.
Okay, back up for me. Just go.
When I.
The levels were so high. What was the word you used? The not complacency. You caught me at a
in between moment.
Okay.
Yeah. Just back up. Continue your thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was happy to fly back.
What's the time on that?
1:15:30. So it would be 1:15-ish.
Right.
Sorry.
It's okay.
No, it's okay. Easy fix.
Okay.
These guys are pros when they
Yeah.
have this stuff.
So I was happy, happy to go back to to Pleiku, excuse me.
Yeah.
And at that time, we were only going to be there for 1 month. And that was because Da Nang Air Base had no room for us. And they needed SAR birds too. So the Air Force wanted to, they hate paying TDY pay. They want to get a unit organized and whatever. So we had 12 pilots and 10 airplanes. 4 pilots were at Da Nang doing search and rescue, and the other 6 of us were, the other 8 of us were at Pleiku, continuing much of the operations that had been flown by the now defunct 6 SOS at Pleiku.
Right. Uh-huh.
We flew missions in the DMZ, Ashaw, on down into the tri-border area. And Jim Wold he could have picked anybody he wanted. He picked 8 lieutenants and 1 captain, 2 majors, and himself. Why did he do that?
Please tell us why. Because
I believe, this is my speculation, the infighting that would go on between majors and lieutenant colonels in units, this is their chance in their aviation or in their military careers to get their combat time and make their career. And the infighting and competitiveness of that was not something that I think he thought highly of, to put it the way I would put it.
Yeah.
And mildly. And so he would rather form his own group and he did a masterful job of bringing us all around to the point where we could make this work.
Absolutely. And again, there's a similarity to having young lieutenants that's reminiscent of the Army and Air Force, having helicopter pilots that were young warrant officers or young second lieutenants or a first lieutenant, because they're young, bold, and would think outside the box a little bit and not be worried about career, but supporting the troops on the ground.
I also need to add that Jim Wold was an enlisted man when he joined, and not a ring knocker, and that he had other pilots that he selected. We had a pretty homogeneous unit, and we have individuals and lots of things that go on. But he, and I will say this, never once do I ever remember Jim Wold going to a podium and talking to us. We were always on call, always on alert. We had chairs in a circle. We didn't have any. We got this once we moved on the 12th of December. We moved to Da Nang, and we were all up there. At Pleiku, we just kind of functioned with what we had back in the day. And we had a hell of a party on the getting away time. And I will confess to this. I was told I was going to be flying a plane back to Da Nang at midday on that day, and I fell asleep in my bed, let's put it that way, about 2 or 3, about 3 in the morning after partying very heavily. And a few hours later, I get a knock on my door that you are going to be going to out in a couple hours. We need to get the planes up there to Da Nang. And I'm going, oh, boys. I'm drinking coffee, getting a shower. And I flew up with Glenn Manning. I could fly. I was okay. We weren't.
You had to fly. You couldn't walk.
It wasn't a combat mission. And I'm flying up there, and I'm on the wing in weather, and we land at Da Nang Air Base. And I'm thinking, oh, good. Now I can get some rest somewhere. We didn't have places to go. It was so crowded. We had 3 guys in the room when I first got there, little rooms. And I remember just saying, oh, good. And then they said, you guys need to get ready because you're going back out. We have a troops in contact mission. And I had a long talk with myself. You can't do this, Don. You can't do this, you moron. And I cursed myself. We get in planes, we take off. I'm getting better. And we go, and they canceled the TIC, troops in contact, and we went and did something else. And then I learned my lesson. Never again could I allow myself to do that. And I'm so embarrassed about that. But I think I could have still done the job. But you can't think that way.
You also had an interesting point here, which is another similarity to the recon men on the ground. How you learned more from sitting around talking at the officers club as opposed to getting lectures from your commander. And you would come back from a mission. Our recon teams would come back from mission, hit the club at FOB1 or Da Nang, CCN, and the other teams did this down south and the Khartoum. Your pilots, in this case, the young lieutenants that this lieutenant colonel brought in, sat there, and after each mission, you would adjust, talk tactics, what worked, what didn't work, and that is state-of-the-art, and perhaps it's a lesson that should be relearned by the military.
That is the schoolhouse right there. And you have to be, and Jim Wold was excellent at that. And so that'll bring another story. It wasn't too much longer after that 5 January mission that I suggested, and I made a number of suggestions, and so did everybody. And I said, why in the world could we not use Army helicopters? We're up at Da Nang now. It takes about 45 minutes by the time you get scrambled and get down there. what if a pilot jumped out down there? Instead of us getting our Jolly Green, could we go in with our Skyraiders, get there faster, or even other Skyraiders in the area, and ask an Army pilot, Cobra pilot, or Huey pilot to go in and pick this pilot up that's been shot down in the tri-border area? Because, if we didn't get there quickly for search and rescue missions, the enemy generally wouldn't fire at us or even the helicopters, the Army helicopters maybe, but they set up a trap.
Use the pilot as bait.
They used the pilot as bait because shooting down the helicopter was the mother of all for them, and the chaos, and then is shooting down as many planes as well. And so I suggested that. And so Jim Wold said, Don, it's good thoughts and everything. What do you know about rigs and seats and such?
Mean like they throw a rope from a helicopter?
Because I'm thinking they land, but you can't always land, right?
Yeah.
And so the rope would be coming down. And I know you got great stories about that. So I was smart ass, I guess. I said, you know what? If I was the pilot down there and I'm on the ground and I see this rope come down, I said, I think what I would do is I would tie that rope around my nuts and I would hang on for dear life. And I'd go up there and I probably could hang on for 90 miles. Well, that's
right. Or how
that's
long?
horse crap, right? You know it. You've done it. And so that reward for me, though, was neat. He had a guy come from CCC and come over and spend time with me. And now I had his name a minute ago, and I'll get it in a second.
He'll come back. But while you're thinking about that, what we did at FOB1 and CCN, and I think they did it at the other FOBs and later, was all the helicopter pilots that worked with us. At some point, they would train us, and then we'd say, okay, it's your turn. And they would throw the ropes down, and then the co-pilot would fly the pilot and the other crew members on the helicopters. Oh, yeah, we got pictures of the muskets doing that out of when they were down there. They got socked in at one of the bases, and so they would do this training locally, and it's like, so this way everybody would have the training. So if your chopper got shot down and you had to get pulled out by ropes, they had the training. And that's the kind of thing you're talking about there.
The guy I'm talking about was Donald Armstrong.
Indeed.
And Don Armstrong came, I'm thinking this might have been in February. I can't remember.
1970?
Yes. And he came, and I had the whole day with him. We had a room up in the hangar that we went to talk. And so I'm very curious, and I keep asking him questions about this. And he told me one time that he had been trapped with another guy, another SOG guy, in a fork in a river, and the enemy was all prepared to they had to cross somewhere, and they were pushing them to the center of that point. And at some point, they just had to let the enemy run by them, and that he was so easily camouflaged his talents and the way you guys operated. At one time, he could have reached out and grabbed the NVA right by the ankle.
Really?
And he's telling me this stuff, and I'm just, but then he informed me that he had a new assignment coming up, and that he was going to be going to Khartoum and be in the back seat of an O-1 plane taking photos, recon photos.
Oh, yeah.
And he became real human when he told me that he was fearful of flying and didn't like this mission. This is like the guys in the platoon in the World War II movies and stuff, and it startled me how he was so concerned. Next thing, I'm consoling him. He told me, though, before that, some things that really got my attention. He told me that after he'd been into places where the A1 Skyraiders had been taking care of business, and they would go into that area wherever that was, and they would have a hard time finding a leaf that did not have a hole in it for the amount of devastation that
Yeah.
And he said they hate your guts.
They mean the North Vietnamese army, the communists.
Any of them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and you're right. And then he told me, anytime I've been on the ground and you're there, they are shooting at you. That wrecked the whole rest of my career because I could never relax again because you don't see a lot of the ground fires, 50 cals and stuff like that. You might not see that. And we flew low. And that was our bread and butter.
That's the saving grace. I mean, as an example, that day of January 5th, you're like 25 feet off the treetops making a gun run or a CBU run. And like you said, as you're going over, there's minimal time for people to take a gun sight at you. And there's hundreds of NVA down there. And that aircraft that day, after all those passes, 2.5 hours with the team, safely away, waiting, making your bomb runs, no bullet holes in your Skyraider. And that's a significant element of this TAC air, close air support.
Let's go back to that a little bit and let me finish this other thing real quickly. So then we were to brief the pilots about McGuire rigs, all the rigs.
Yeah.
And Stabo and whatever all of them are. And I was to be... He had me do that. I was to brief the pilots that weren't there that day afterwards and inform them about. And he liked this idea. And I don't know. I think one time it happened. I have vague memories of one pilot being extracted by the Army and taken back to Khartoum, and I think it worked out. But that one's pretty vague on my memory. And then he told me, in no uncertain terms, that he was very nervous about going on from there. So after that day, I didn't see him again. And I remember distinctly hearing about 3 weeks after that we had spent that day together, I knew that an 01 backseater had been killed at Khartoum. And Don Armstrong had been shot in the head and was killed.
With a 50 caliber.
Yes.
And that was those secret missions that they were flying then that we talked about.
Down in the treetops. And what I was told is those guys, you don't get a second chance. You don't go back around and take a photograph. You just keep moving. I don't know what happened. I was sick.
Oh, yeah.
I cared for him. It wrecked me emotionally. That it's like he knew. And that's purely my feeling.
Yeah.
And so back to the, while we're just talking about it, we started getting replacement pilots in as early as February, March time frame, and then in April and everything.
1970.
In 1970. And turned out to be one of our great pilots was Tom Stump. And Tom Stump came just about a month before I was leaving. I didn't really know him very well. We can talk about him later. But I remember the commander then was Pete Williams, and Jim Woldhead, or at least he was flying with Pete Williams, and Pete became the commander for a month, and that was to help his career. And Pete was a good pilot, and and it worked for him. But Tom Stump came, and Pete's notes, he gave them to me. My wife and I have to say about my wife, Linda, my second wife, helped me and helped all of us so much. I can't even express it. And she passed away, sadly, 6 months ago, which is another reason I'm pretty emotional sometimes.
Certainly.
But, and she found Mel Swanson for me. She also helped me. We got Pete Williams' notes. And in there, Tom Stump was new and came to us. And they were bombing Pete said it was a mountain. It was actually dropping napes on a hill.
Sure.
And Tom Stump missed, Pete put in his notes, missed the whole mountain. So I know Tom really well, and we talk about that. And there is no gun sight that you can drop unfinned napes with. You can look at that gun sight all you want. The way I would do it is I would pretend my rear end was lead.
Right.
And if it fell out of the bottom of the airplane, about where would this land? But if you're waiting for the gun sight by that, you're going to be you're going to shoot way over where you were intending to shoot or drop. And Tom and I laugh about this all the time, and he's real good natured about it. But he had never been in the weeds before, and so when I left the 6th to go to NKP. Before that, I remember a couple of things that I was taught. I had one more thing, and that is that if you get down in the weeds, stay in the weeds. You can't pop up like an F-16 and go straight up to 3,000 feet or come back down. In an A-1, you could get 10 feet. We used to laugh, before you were already bleeding off your ears because you're so you're slow, you're laden,
and you're big,
and
one engine,
and so you just have to. It has to be seat of the pants.
Sure.
So
that's a key tactic.
At the end, I put 10 mils in my gun sight, and never changed it ever, and I knew about where I could go above the mill setting. You're looking at like a gun sight.
Right, sure.
And so for guns, I would do this. For napes, I would do this. For CBU, I'd do that. And
everything had its own adjustment.
Yes, and very hard bombing, trying to drop bombs from hard altitude, I did very, very little of that. You didn't want us dropping bombs that way for you. I had one night mission where a team was in trouble. They wanted us to drop bombs on a fire area with fire just to keep the enemy nervous or something. And I flew that one with Jax Roberts. I screwed my first pass up so badly I didn't even drop, and I probably went below the mountains before I woke up because I'm rolling in at night in this old altitude indicator. But otherwise it was in the weeds, and we did that. So that is a significant part of how the unit developed.
Sure.
Back to Jim Wold and the way we learned. We would tell the truth about, hey, this happened to me this day, this happened. Could we do this? Could we do that? Another idea that I had that I actually employed, and Jim Wold wrote about it, was since we are so short of airplanes, if you launch our SAR birds, there are no SAR birds to be available. So then another crew would be called in and come in and cock another 2 airplanes. And we didn't have enough airplanes sometimes, and the maintenance, and it's all this documents that I have with me.
Right.
So it was a situation where we had to do the most with the least. And I suggested that in country, for sure, but out country they would do it too. Army helicopter pilots were crazy. They didn't even have, most of them never even had instrument flying.
Right.
They all seat of the pants. And I was on some missions where they were screaming and laughing and stuff about flying in clouds.
Like the young lieutenants from the Air Force flying A-1 Skyraiders.
Yeah, so
very similar.
Pretty similar, actually, yes. And so I did fly a SAR, not too far from Da Nang Air Force Base. A Marine F-4 pilot was gunning down enemy in an area that was desirable to the enemy because it was within range to lob 122 millimeter rockets into Da Nang.
Right, so that's their target.
They liked that area that they could do, and they shot the plane down, they actually, with 50 cal traps, they would get up a bunch of them, or if they had a 50 cal multiple barrels. Right. Anyhow, they killed the pilot. The plane crashed.
And this is an F-4, Marine Corps F-4 that crashed, and he crashed making a dry run.
Yes.
They were out of ammo.
Yes.
But if they make a run, the enemy would hear it coming. It would cause them to
because
pause.
he's a Marine and he's helping his Marines.
His fellow Marines on the ground,
yes.
Indeed.
And he was from Minnesota, and the pilot, the backseater ejected both of them. And when he hit the ground, and I was called out, I was the flight lead that day, and I had the privilege of having Larry Cavender, an excellent pilot, with me. And we went out there and picked them up, and we used the Cobras. And I met the commander of the Jolly was giving a check ride to a new guy. So he was sitting in the left seat, and the right seat was the pilot in training. One thing I didn't think to brief about him, I had the Cobras go out and get him, and he said, man, that was cool. We made 3 laps and we were ready, and we would lay rows of smoke. And the way you would do it is Larry did one on the left side, I did the right side.
This is around the Marine on the ground.
Yes, yes. Where the pickup person is down in the jungle, you want to have a row of smoke to block the enemy from shooting at the helicopters. Ideally, and this one we actually got away with it and did it, the smoke would come in and cover the helicopters up, but they could still hover in the same spot.
Right.
And I had the most highly decorated PJ was on that helicopter in the war, and his name escapes me, and I apologize. But he was by far, and he went down and got this guy out. This guy was running around in the jungle with his pistol trying to find his lead.
Right.
And it was very sad. And I actually found a picture of him, and he was sent home. I found information about him mourning. He could see the peaks from the hospital at Chulai. And I saw a picture of him, his wife, and his little baby at Miramar that I found. And I felt really good that we helped him to get to that point.
Yes, the Miramar National Cemetery, which is in San Diego County.
Yeah, and they have a base there. And he's recovering. And I never made any attempt to try to contact the family and let them know that this is what happened and everything.
Sure.
I would love to talk to them if they would want to talk to me, if they would somehow know this. But it's, and I have the names and whatever. But, and I never contacted the deceased pilot either. It's just business what we did. So,
absolutely. Let's get back to
yes, sir.
A little more definition on Ola, because I still want to get a little bit of that history here before we go to Operation Tailwind, which was another classic mission.
Yes.
Again, the SPADs and the Air Force had to provide unique coverage on that mission, which was also a Medal of Honor recipient mission, just like January the 5th in 1970.
Yes.
So Ola, again, this is now going through that restructuring and getting, after fighting behind the scenes with higher brass above your pay grade, to get the close support needed for SOG teams.
Okay.
And so Ola, first of all, Operation Location Alpha, what the heck kind of a squadron name is that? That's even worse than the Navy.
It was I can say pretty honestly that I believe, well, first of all, the hierarchy generals never liked this prop stuff.
Right.
They didn't.
Particularly in 1960, 1970. We had jets. They had jets for two decades now.
And so there's many stories I could go on for hours about how the fight it was to keep the props.
Let me just cut that short. Historically, the Air Force, close air support is not a priority mission. They want the latest and fastest jet fighters and to move forward that. And close air support, that's a secondary issue with them. Even in the last 20 years, look at what they've done with the Warthogs.
Yes.
The high brass in the Air Force, like, excuse my French, fuck the close air support. We want our jets, and eventually they get around, they're able to be there. And thankfully, the leadership at that point got Ola to come down to support SOG for another how many months?
We started up again on the closure of the 6th on the 15th.
Of November 1969.
Yes, and then we consolidated on the 12th of December, which is what most of records show. And you're absolutely right. But I'll tell you this, there wasn't one attack pilot that I know of ever that didn't think that his job was worth having to support the Army or whatever. I mean, that's what you did. Search and rescue gets all of the attention and will be at the event that I'm going to tomorrow. But, and it should. But some of the things that, at NKP, they had a rule, and we were supposed to have this too, that if we were doing a search and rescue mission for a downed pilot, and another one of our pilots got shot down, that we just stopped the mission and went and got our pilot. I questioned that there. I said, time out. How do we determine that we're more important? There could be circumstances when maybe that's not appropriate, and I know of one where that happened, and I won't go into a lot of detail. I won't talk about it. It wasn't. It was one of our guys that thinks he could have had to pick up, and it didn't. And it was a Marine OV-10 with 2 guys that were shot down. I was in Thailand on leave when that happened. So you're correct in that, but being an attack pilot, now I think back of what I wanted, I couldn't have had a better job. And then I watched the F-4s bomb and some of the other things, and I thought, I'm not going back for a second tour. If I get through this tour, this will be plenty. And there's nothing more rewarding. And you will see in this event that we're having and everything, saving down pilots, and to me, saving SOG or Army guys, they're all one flavor. They're just that to me, they're Americans fighting, and we have to give everything we have or be prepared to die.
And here's proof of that. I mean, during your time in Ola, there was a period of time when you went for 20 days in a row, flying combat missions, flying sorties, and at some point your CEO came out and ordered you to do what? He may have seen something you weren't aware of, like in terms of fatigue.
We only had 10 airplanes and 12 pilots. Jim Wold needed more planes. Those planes demanded a lot of maintenance. We had airplanes that had a lot of maintenance problems. The heavy maintenance was done at NKP. So we had to ferry airplanes back and forth to keep them in there. But yes, when we you just had to do whatever you could. We would do, and so Jim Wold, when we were on call, in the morning we would go out first light. We would cock the airplane. I think I described that. Then we would go and we would get into bunks or whatever. We would also be on call in your room.
Sure.
So if we launched a SOG mission, then you get called in your room. I have a brick or whatever, and somebody come and get you, and you got to come down and cock another airplane.
Sure.
And sometimes we were overtaxed a lot. And that's what happened with us sitting around, and how do we make this work better? How can we save resources? But we were totally committed. And I have to say that it was, I know of one example of a search and rescue, and I won't go into, where perhaps some rules from the other side affected our ability to complete a mission and resulted in some casualties. I think we did the best we could every time we went out. And every man in the unit, when you're talking this way and you're comparing things, you learn and you think, that's smart. That was a good thing to
And
do.
guys, again, you're talking back at the officers
Yes,
club.
and Jim Wold, we usually did it in our quarters. We didn't get to the club much.
Okay, wherever you did it, you talked.
Yeah, yes.
That's what counts.
In our, you have 6 guys, 6 pilots out there at all times, sometimes more, and just like you guys, when you got back from missions, whether you're playing cards, whether you're whatever you're doing, and you're talking, you're learning.
Right.
And so that was critical.
Well,
I don't know
here's
if I
another thing,
covered
too.
that as well as you wanted.
And one thing we haven't covered is you've talked about flying an A1 Skyraider. Give us a little bit of the nomenclature of an A1 Skyraider, the engine size. And again, the majority of those aircraft was single pilot. And over our course, our time on the ground, we were always told, oh, they're A1s, they're A1Es.
Yes.
Well, after the war, 30 or 40 years later, we finally talked to an Air Force guy that flew a Skyraider. We learned that the A1Es are the fat face with 2 pilots. And they were rare. They weren't used very often.
You were given symbols by the Army that showed fat faces for, they called them A1Hs.
Yeah.
We laughed about that.
But talk a little bit what it was
yes.
like to fly the because it has so much power. Even on takeoff, you had to be careful taking off with those aircraft.
These 10 airplanes that we had, when Jim Wold was summoned to NKP for this new deal, he insisted we have to have single-seat airplanes. Why? Because you can't see out the left side. If you're flying in the left,
right side,
if the right side, you can't see through that. If they're sitting in the left seat or the right seat, 2 people in there can do a good job. Look both, but we're not going to carry 2 people on every flight. And for the fat faces,
and you're low on personnel to begin with.
Yes, exactly. And so he insisted on that because you can't see that you're being shot at. You can't work in close on the ground as well, and so. Every time I show you, maybe we would have 1 fat face once in a while for training, where 2 pilots had for instrument training, the requirements that didn't do anything for us. We should have always had single-seat airplanes, and they had less tail than the other airplane did. So some ways,
and what does that mean? Because I'm not a pilot, so if you have less tail.
You couldn't actually snap the airplane around as much in the H model as you could in the E model because of the size of the rudder.
Okay.
But that wasn't an offset to anything. It was much better to fly the H model airplanes, and that's what we flew. And that was disconcerting to some people at Nakam Phanom that they had to give us. But all the planes that they took from the 6th, I believe that we had, when I was in the 6th, we had 20-some airplanes, about 24, and all of them were H's and J's single-seaters because of what I just told you. And Don Deneen and all those guys that you know some about now, they were our mentors, and I give credit to them. They were formed specifically because of SOG. And they did a great job. I have one war story there that you might find interesting. At one time, Don Deneen, the Army, their military, was always trying to get us from, if you're flying for SOG and SARS, that's what you should be doing. They always want to give us frag missions. They did that to our unit too for AC-119s for a while at night. And then Don Deneen told me that they wanted to make night facts out of some of the planes that they had at Pleiku. And that led to an interesting thing, and I don't think you'll mind me telling this, that for a while they were taking the brand new guys and putting them on SOG missions. And the other older heads were out flying at night facking, which the airplane was not good to do and wasn't very effective. And he went to the commander and said, look, we're killing these new guys we're wearing them out. They're flying, and they're flying our best missions, our most important missions that take care of the Army lives. We need to get this reversed, and I believe he succeeded in that, getting that to reverse.
Well, and also just to the next point, recently, I mean, within the last few weeks, I heard for the first time that the number of A1 Skyraider KIAs was 102 over the entire war.
That was the number of casualties.
Casualties, not KIAs.
KIAs.
Okay.
Yeah, that were killed.
So that just gives us the extent of...
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
That's
yes,
okay.
That is the number, and we have people missing too. And
well, then I got to ask the obvious question: had they trained and the other A1 Skyraider pilots, had they trained and flown using the tactics that Ola did, would there have been less?
I think so.
Yeah.
Especially supporting you. So you read Da Nang diaries and other books about it, and you see how much they missed. So what I was absolutely amazed to find out, trying to get a cramp in my leg. What I was amazed to find out is that we had, I lost my train of thought, sorry. You asked me, could you ask me again?
Well, we're talking about the Skyraiders and the casualties.
Oh, yes.
And, it had the tactics.
Yes. And the tactics were unique that they used in the 6th SOS. We had less equipment to deal with, so we had to modify some things that we did.
Right.
And the loads were very important. You remember we were at a meeting together when 500-pound bombs were used for close air support for one of your first interview.
Well, yeah, and we had 500-pound bombs that we used to support. So
Don Deneen was flying behind, I can't remember his name right now, your first interview, the troll.
Yes.
And he's trying to figure out how close can I drop a 500 bomb as guy's running across that ridge line. And remember, the troll was in the audience, and he said, "Hey, that was me." And Don Deneen was a heck of a guy. He flew 300 combat missions and 25 flight check in a year.
Wow.
And then Win DePorter had over 600 missions in the 6th SOS.
Sure.
We didn't fly as many missions, but we had so fewer pilots and whatever. We needed more pilots and we needed more airplanes. And they were always short of airplanes. Be frank, I don't think many people wanted to come from Thailand to come to us and do what we did.
Right.
And for any number of reasons, not all negative. And so we had to optimize what we did. And the loads were critical.
Sure.
So we picked our own, we talked a little bit about this, and we consolidated those, and we would go from mission to mission. We would pull people off of SOG missions if we could safely, and then go ahead and fly on a SAR, and vice versa.
And vice versa, sure.
If necessary. And we were dancing on pins sometimes trying to see, could we really pull away and whatever. And I wanted to say this, in 69 was a very bad year. The 6th SOS lost, I think, 14 or 15 pilots over the 2 years or so that they existed, and they lost quite a few airplanes. We lost some men, too. One man flew into a mountain. I'm not going to go into detail. From Ola.
Yeah.
And then 2 other pilots one was coming off of a SOG mission. They got some separation between the 2 men, and the plane that the flight lead was hurt, and he crashed in the Ashaw Valley. And Mel Swanson has a great story about going and having him be recovered. and there was one other death that I can't pick off the top
But
of my
that's
head.
3 from Ola. And
Yeah.
again, Ola was in Da Nang from November of 69 until when?
In Da Nang from December 69 until early December of 1970. So if you count the part, and we should,
Yeah.
from 15 November, we basically were a year and a month.
Because you're still on call. You're still flying missions.
We were-
regardless of where you're
we were doing-
sleeping at night. Yes.
Exactly. And it was with great sadness, I think, when they finally did shut us down. And I know Tom Yarborough noticed the difference immediately, because now you still had teams out there. When was the last team run?
Well,
About
they
72?
In there to early 72.
Yeah.
By that time, they were running, like my recon team was running all indig missions, where Do Ti Quang was the 1-0 or the
Okay.
0-1.
Okay.
And the Americans, Ken Barre and Frank Poley, had advised them before they went out. But they were on the ground. They did missions. I'm not sure how many. And this is early 72. So
Okay.
you still had 71.
And so 71, Tom Yarborough and I've spoken. I've never met him, but he continued. He received a lot of silver stars. He was a really good guy, and the way he was picked is kind of interesting. So we have all these Covey facts at Da Nang,
Right.
and they weren't most of the Covey facts that were tri-border area were coming out of Pleiku,
Sure.
and long after the A1s left as well. So one day Tom Yarborough had been flying at Da Nang, and they bunked right up above us, and we had all crammed in with Jolly Greens and facts above us, and we had rooms on the bottom floor. And Tom had a major come to him and said, "I want to talk to you." And they went in a room. He said, we're looking at you. We like what we're seeing. We want to ask you to do a job. Very, very dangerous job. It's going to be a lot different than you think. And I want you to think seriously about this, because we would like to incorporate you into this part that we do some of. And think about it overnight, and then let me know the next day. And if you do it, you can't talk to anybody about what you're doing. So Tom thought about it, and he took it. And that was right about the time I was going home. And he became a very experienced and very good fac. Every morning, he's in a room with all the other facs. He can't tell them what he does. He can't talk to his roommates about it. We at least had roommates that we could talk with.
Sure.
And he would go and get in an OV-10 and fly up to Quang Tree.
Which was a launch site for SOG.
Yes, it was only, 18 miles or so from the DMZ border.
Very close.
Yeah. And he would go up there, pick up a Covey rider, and we did a lot of missions in the DMZ. I flew quite a few up there, Coal Rock area.
Wow.
And,
yeah, of course. Coal Rock.
Yashaw
Valley.
Ashaw, and some of that, and less so than...
So what was his top secret mission?
What was this now?
What was Tom's top secret mission there?
He couldn't talk. He was now a Prairie Fire fac.
Okay.
And he couldn't tell his roommates what he was doing.
Right.
Anybody. And he continued that, and I asked him, and he told me he was deeply saddened by the when he lost his A1s. Teams
Sure.
would say, "We need A1s. I don't have them for you. I can't. There are no A1s. They'll have to come from Thailand. Maybe we can get you some."
And it takes a longer flight.
Seconds matter,
Sure.
not minutes, not hours.
Yeah.
And so, it's just it's very sad.
Yeah. Okay.
One other
so-
thing, at the end of '69, the casualties were very severe. You would think with just the small unit we had that would continue, Who was the commander there? Let's say Schnabel, not
Shungle?
Shungle.
SCCC.
Yes, and if you read in the Secret War book, he in the Secret War, the author, actually concluded that 1970 was a good year. There were more SOG Prairie Fire emergencies,
Right.
and less resources,
And less casualties.
and less casualties
Because,
because of OLA.
indeed.
In part, obviously,
Yeah.
the teams do their thing, we do our thing. There's no other correlation that makes any sense and we did it with so few people. And Jim Wold demanded or asked in his end of tour report, he was pretty gutsy about some of the things that he said. And he said, we at least have to get 2 more airplanes. And they tried that deal with us. When we were going to go into Cambodia, then they sent some of us to Pleiku for a while. And we got involved into Dak Siang and other missions. And these things were, I think we managed to, I can't say we managed to do it all, but I think we did extremely well.
Yeah, just for the record, Dak Siang was an A camp that was under siege for a long time.
Yes.
And you guys supported that.
Yes.
And then in the early 1970, we had the incursion that eventually went down. Before that, the secret B-52 strikes that came out years later. And that was major operations. Again, there's our Skyraiders, ever present.
I think because I spent that time with Don Armstrong, I think I knew in some cases more than personalized. I'm not saying our guys didn't try to do the best. I just had this feeling, and I just thought, and I would argue this. I'd say those guys in the Army are worth any pilot's life that was ever flying. And I think that we need to give them, we all talk that way, and we had to do that.
Sure.
And once you meet, I've met Mike Force's guys and stuff like that. When I first got, I didn't tell that part, when I first got to Pleiku, they sent a couple of LRP guys up from the
Mike Force.
Mike Forces.
And a Mike Force was a quick reaction force for the Special Forces when an 8 camp would be under siege, or if there had been a regular Special Forces unit in the field that got into trouble, the Mike Force in country would respond to that.
Tell about LRPs, because Douglas Miller was a LRP before he became a SOG guy.
Right, with the first Cav.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And those are long-range patrol guys, but they weren't going over the fence, if I understand it correctly.
Correct. It was in country.
Maybe there were exceptions.
There may have been a couple of cases where the border, we're not quite sure where it is.
Yeah. I've read about that.
We'll call that border fudging.
Well, I think just based on the Secret War comments, what I believe to be the case and learned so much about was that, yes, you guys, we had to fight as hard for you as possible. And Jim Wold knew that more than anybody.
Sure.
And he was so good about using the resources.
Yeah.
And almost apologetic that we were working so hard. And I never thought that way, and I don't think any of the guys did. We got calls to do things, we just went out and did them.
Sure.
We would joke around sometimes. There was a guy who fell out of a C-130.
His name John Stryker Meyer.
Yeah.
This was a case where I had it all wrong. I thought he fell off the back of a ramp.
Right.
He actually was using a laser on a side door. And I found out not too long ago that they had a lanyard. And one of our pilots was done with the war, but he was back over there doing some other things. And he said, somebody's going to fall out of they're going to get that fall out of that door opening, and that lanyard's going to because of that lanyard.
And what was the lanyard attached to?
It was hooked to the side of the plane to give the chute to go off after it raveled its way out.
Right,
enough,
okay, yeah.
Unraveled. And sure enough, this guy hooked the darn thing, and the pilot chute went out, and it sucked him out the door. And John Weinig was the captain, and Jax Roberts was the guys that were called out. And I remember our joke used to be feet wet or F 'em. When somebody do something like that, we thought he should walk to the water where we could have a safe rescue, just joking.
Yeah.
And so John Weinig, I'll mess this up and Jax will have me for it, but basically he got in contact with this guy. He'd fallen through he only got a partial chute. Somehow managed to live going through the trees, and John's talking to him, and he's trying to identify him and
right.
whatever, and he asks him some questions in his radio voice and everything, and then he said, "Are you wounded?" And he said, "Oh," and he said, "Yes, I am wounded." "No, okay, fine, you're wounded," because you say, "Yeah, I'm this," and "Yeah, I'm that," and Jax laughs about that, and I laugh about it too. But they went in, and of course, on that mission, another thing would happen. They didn't think that we were adequate enough sometimes to take care of business. And so they were building, sending forces now from NKP where they do this stuff and we don't do it, being a little sarcastic. And anyhow, John and Jax Roberts picked this guy up. And we were joking about it, that he should have walked to the water, and poor guy.
After falling out of a C-130.
But and I didn't know.
Oh,
I didn't find that out till years later.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly that he fell out of it. And what they were trying to do is put a laser down so F-4s could launch laser bombs on the beam and be very accurate.
Right.
So anyhow.
So moving along,
yes.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to visit another historic mission where a Medal of Honor was awarded to a Green Beret medic from Operation Tailwind, which again, the Skyraiders were a vital part of that mission. And the mission was designed to take pressure off a CIA operation that was further west in Laos on the Bolivian plains. And the mission was from September 11th to the 14th. Team was a hatchet force. 16 Green Berets, and then 120 in DIG were inserted by Marine Corps CH-53 Deltas, the biggest helicopter in Nam at that time. And the mission was to take pressure off of the CIA. They went in, got inserted. Even on the insertion, there were 2 or 3 wounded in action. And one of the returning helicopters had to take back the wounded back to Da Nang with them. They were on the ground. And a key part of this operation was they would be on the ground and moving day and night. And the first day on the ground, within 2 hours, they hit a major cache, and they had military intel out of it. And, of course, the key moment was in that first 2 hours, they're in this command center. The telephone rang. And Captain Gene McCarley, who was the team leader, picked up the phone. "Hello, may I help you? 5th Special Forces Group." So to this day, Ho Chi Minh, the boys, are still trying to figure out how that one happened. But when they moved day and night, the Skyraiders, Marine Corps Cobra gunships with Scarface, Army, and at night they'd have Spectre over the team. And sometimes the Skyraiders would stay as late as they could at night. And that mission there, we've talked more about that previously, but again, you weren't there, but you talked to the guys who were there and just get a little bit more of that insider look from a Skyraider pilot's perspective on that day. Or that mission, I mean, for 4 days.
I organized that Tailwind reunion. You did a great job of guiding that mission. I was not on that mission.
We're just talking about the reunion, which was now 40 years after the mission.
Yes.
Essentially.
Oh, it was more than that, I think. And, over 40. And so couple things about that mission, and you did an excellent job of explaining that. And you can see that Military Tales is done by Rich Benjamin on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's interviewed a lot of people, and he deserves more credit than I could ever give him. I encourage anybody to go to Military Tales and listen to
this is Military Tales, Tales,
yes.
Not Military Tales, which us young guys would be still thinking about, perhaps.
Okay, good. Thanks for making that point.
And Rich Benjamin has done a great job with that.
He happened to be there that day with some cameras.
Right.
And then the one that I had from Jim Wold Day was taken by Warbird Digest. But and so now he's doing this. We lured him in, and he is so wonderful, and he is doing so much good work. And that whole thing, it's a couple hour long interview.
Well, he also records the Mel Swanson Day too.
We did all of that, yeah, and that's going to be coming out shortly. And so he actually Dennis did the interview. And Mel Swanson's going to be coming out. But we also had a day for Mel Swanson, too, so we got both interviews. Tom Stump, I want to talk to Tom. I joked about him missing the mountain.
Right.
Tom Stump became an excellent, excellent pilot. The main support for Operation Tailwind, it was a bad deal when they sent the choppers over without the A1s and the Marines took them over from this point of view. They didn't take them high enough.
For the day of insertion.
Yes, and I think if they had A1s, it would have gone higher and they wouldn't have taken as many holes getting in.
Right, and also at that time, by now, the NVA had moved a lot of anti-aircraft, much more anti-aircraft weaponry south after Johnson had the bombing pause of November of 68. They came south, which included the 37 Mike that would explode like anti-aircraft, like the World War II
Russian
movies.
help.
Of course, with the Russians.
And that was, who was the one that figured that out? I'm trying to remember his name now, one of your guys that was talking to son of a Russian.
Oh, yeah, Doc Paget.
Doc Paget. And so all these things just come out of nowhere and you start piecing them together. Tom Stump had only flew on the last day.
Right.
Ola was sort of primary for the close-in work on that, but we had a lot of support from NKP.
Which is fellow Skyraider pilots coming out of NKP.
And because there were so many swarms of enemy coming in and night bombing, and then we also had gas birds from NKP.
And gas birds were carrying tear gas.
CS gas, yes.
Right.
And that was all controversy.
Another story.
Tom Stump happened to be the pilot.
Well, let me interrupt for a second to talk about, because the first day they hit the cache, they moved day and night. And of course, that first night, an RPG came into went through the command center. They were having a team meeting, and it came through the command, got past all the people, hit a tree, exploded, and the shrapnel came back, wounding the medic, Gary Mike Rose, several of the team members, and the Indige. A couple of the Indige were seriously wounded, and they carried them for the next 3 days of the mission. And they moved day and night, enemy contact, more NVA were coming in. The third day, they hit another command bunker and got more intelligence, paperwork from there. And then on the third day, they're going to try to extract the seriously wounded. And they came out with a CH-53 Delta again. As they were getting ready to load the wounded, it got hit with anti-aircraft fire. It took off, it crashed, and they couldn't get the wounded out. They're going to, day 4 said, we're going to try to get the wounded out again. The weather closed in, and by now we had thousands of NVA troops coming to, converging on their location. And the key part of that, at one point, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn to a book, SOG Chronicles, Volume 1 by yours truly, that we talk about, Tom, because the first 2 helicopters got out. They came in, took out the wounded first, second helicopter came in, and at some point, the weather was so bad, and then the FACT had to leave. Low on fuel, he turned it over to A1 Skyraider pilot Tom Stump. said, I've got to leave, but here's the frequency. And he was talking with Gene McCarley, who was the captain of the OIC on the ground. And the way Tom Stump described the weather was dog shit when we took off. I wasn't optimistic about getting the team out at all. And he was on the ground with Gene McCarley. They were talking back and forth. And they have these problems. And at some point, Covey ran dangerously low on fuel. Stump took over, and McCarley directed the airstrikes. And Tom was talking about Gene McCarley. I'll never forget it. When I spoke to Gene, his voice was as calm as a man at a Sunday church picnic, Stump said. He had the slow southern drawl, and calmly he was getting his ass kicked down there, and all the while I could hear gunfire down there, explosions from ground grenades. With all the SF wounded and the large number of casualties they had, I couldn't see them getting out. And once Stump and his fellow pilots maneuvered below the clouds, they had to be extremely aware of the jagged buttes and the irregular mountains. And the CBU ordinance slowed down one faction of NVA that had several hundred men that were closing in on the team. And years later, Gene McCarley said, had Tom Stump not gotten below the clouds somehow miraculously, dropped the CBU on the NVA coming towards that team, it would have been finito. And at that critical moment in time, and then later, after the first or second helicopter came out, the A1 Skyraiders came in from NKP, dropped some of this tear gas, and it confused the enemy enough that the third helicopter, the last helicopter getting the last men out, McCarley and Mike Rose, the last people getting out of that mission. Of course, that helicopter crashed after it was taken off. That's another story, but still, again, the vital role of the Skyraiders on a SOG mission that was historic, and Mike Rose, the medic, earned the Medal of Honor that day. Didn't get it till 2017, but he earned it.
I'd like to say a couple things.
Please, that's why you're here.
Gene McCarley should have got a Medal of Honor, too.
Oh, clearly.
There's just no doubt about it. And both of them are amazing people. And I know Mike, and I met him, and I had the fortune of meeting Gene also and organizing this event that you led. Tom Stump, how did our rules work that we had for our ability to go in and drop bombs on close-in support for teams? Only one way. That was the Covey Rider. So you have a Covey Rider who is in charge of the mission and controlling all of this. There was no Covey there when Tom Stump showed up.
Right.
The previous flight, we don't know exactly who it was, didn't get in through the weather. Tom's having conversations with Gene McCarley when he gets out there, and he gets through the weather. It was marginal for him to get down. But let's talk about something else.
Yeah, please.
What had happened if Tom Stump was supporting the team, and they killed the team, or the enemy killed the team, or whatever, and Tom Stump gets back and they say, on whose authority were you down there? Those radio waves from Gene McCarley don't count. They didn't have really an authorization to go down unless there was a Covey Rider saying that.
Right.
And I told Tom, I said, if something had gone back asswards, you could have been, he never really thought about that. But and Tom and Chris Tedeschi were
Which
heroes.
was his wingman.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they had Russian artillery shooting at them. He thought it was B-40s, but they don't go off in the air.
No.
And one barely missed Chris. I've tried to get Chris, and he's not receptive to coming in. Tom thinks the world of him.
Sure.
And those two guys did such an
On
amazing
that day, they
job.
were the dynamic duo out there that saved the team.
Let me tell you one other thing that
Please
you probably do not know. After Tom, then they ran below fuel, and they helicopter took off and then crashed. Tom and Chris went roaring back to Pleiku. To the base, and back at Da Nang, and turned airplanes and came back out. So they got new loads and
Right.
fuel, and but they couldn't work down into the canyon where no fixed wing could. Even an OV-10 couldn't fly down there, where they landed on the rock and all the things that happened.
After the last helicopter that left crashed.
Yes.
And they couldn't work it.
Yeah, it was a crash, although it was an auto-rotate and survived. And I didn't realize until recently that the rock was a last-minute change in the book that was written by one of the
by
Marine...
Barry
Pensick.
Yes, sir.
Excellent book on Amazon. I did
Yeah.
high ratings, and you should read this
Operation
book.
Tailwind. Great book.
But
And
of
Barry
course,
was on an earlier SOGcast.
yes. But of course, you have different situations because they don't know what the A1s are doing. And so it took everything to make that work.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here's what you probably don't know that Tom found out more recently. After his children getting interested in his war service and some help there, he found out that he recalled that after they got back airborne and they have some gas and everything and they're about ready to, it's over, and they get a call from Khartoum that we got a problem. We're missing 3 men.
Oh, that's right.
We doing our counts of our men. There were 18, I believe, men.
There are 16 Green Berets, and then there was 120 Indige.
Okay. And they're missing 3 men. Tom, Stump, and Chris go back to look for them.
Wow.
This is a hot, overly hot area, and they're down looking for mirror flashes or anything they can, and they're endangering themselves even one more chance to get killed, and then they get a call, oh, we found them.
Oh, no kidding.
And they were able to proceed and go back and live to fight again. And Chris was instrumental. I wish he knew that, how much he did and how much it was appreciated. He actually did go back down. Nobody from our unit was ever went to Khartoum then. And because we didn't have
they had the party.
Yeah, but they had a party, and Chris is photographed in the party.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. I want to bring up one thing I didn't mention earlier. On the 5 January mission that we talked about at length, and I could never find the FAQ that was on there in the beginning and the Covey Rider. And little did I know it, in my own records, I discovered it finally a little bit later, thanks to all the hard work my wife had done for me. And so I now then knew it was John LaHecka and Zumber, James Zumber.
And LaHecka was the Air Force pilot, lieutenant,
Yes.
and then the other guy was he was the Covey Rider, the SF soldier.
Very
Jim.
qualified Covey Rider. What I learned was that he was killed 5 days later.
He being LaHecka
and Zumber. And LaHecka was flying another mission, and he took a round to the head, and they crashed. The Covey Rider wasn't able to control the plane or whatever, and they augured in. And Jim Wold and Larry Cavender, 5 days later, were summoned out to have a SAR recovery,
right,
and also to blow up the airplane, is what I had read. I don't know. I'll be very clear what I know and what I don't know. But they went out there, and unbeknownst to me, I have never met him. Lee Birkins, who became the leader of RT Vermont after Douglas Miller was no longer there.
Right, he was recuperating from all his wounds.
He also was there and went back and then wanted to run, and then he was summoned that they had to get him out of there. And he was sent to Hawaii, and that's where his book was written and other things. He wanted to keep fighting.
Sure.
They don't want to have a Medal of Honor person.
Again, we're talking about Frank Miller.
Yes.
And who was the 1-0 of RT Vermont on that historic day. He did receive the Medal of Honor.
So Lee Birkins was on the bright light that went in. The bright light, sadly, both pilots were killed, and Lee Birkins had to extract Laheka from the aircraft and got his remains. He had to use his knife to get him out of the plane. I won't go into any more detail than that. And the Zumbrun's remains were... there's just no way to extract them. It crashed, damaged
the
radios and crashed. And they were under fire and got out of there, and that's what they accomplished. And then later on, another group went back in. I don't know. I talked to Larry Cavender about it. I think they were told that they were supposed to blow up the plane. That's what they did sometimes.
We've had stories in my books and on the ground in the case of an O2 that crashed.
It's just the way it was. Yeah. But they were later on able to go in and get remains from Zumbrun. And so that's important to family members and all the other things that they did. And these were just the kinds of things that we had going on around us. And I am so proud to be an SOA member. I'm so honored to have met you. When I first went out there, Jax Roberts and 4 or 5 other guys came. Jax told me he came because
he did. Colonel Mel Swanson.
Well, that was later. And when we first went out there, because I was the one that talked to Mel and got him in
the next
doing
year.
This. Yep. And Jack said he came out there and he said Jack's is a pretty liberal, I guess, is fair enough.
Fair.
And he would tell people, they say, "What did you do in the war?" And he said, "Oh, I was in the business of saving lives." And after we spent a week with you and we did a briefing, as you recall back then, that's how I started getting really involved in some of this stuff. Jack's... I met him when we were checking out, and he said, "Don, I wrote you this sent you a text about it." He said, "I used to tell people we were in the business of saving people. We really were."
Absolutely.
And yes, we really were.
And we have SOG recon teams and hatchet forces that are alive today.
Yes, and hatchet forces that did that for our men. I don't know if we had crashed in Cambodia, if anybody would have gone in there to get us or not. But I bet they would have.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. We've had stories about our bright lights, our term was bright light for your SAR. So if there's if a pilot had crashed, we had many teams that went out over the 8-year secret war.
Yep.
Whether they were Skyraider, Phantom jets, or anything, and
so I guess you can sum this up as we both were willing to die for each other.
Amen.
If there's anything better than that, I don't know what it is.
Isn't it? So while you're there, do me a favor and pull your shirt out so we can see Lieutenant America and explain what Lieutenant America is on that T-shirt, because Lieutenant America is an A1 Skyraider that still flies today. 50 plus years ago, it flew combat missions in support of SOG, and that aircraft can be found where?
At Tennessee Museum of Aviation. Neil Melton and Rhonda Melton run the museum.
In lovely downtown Sevierville, Tennessee.
Yes, and please, and thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
I first went to the museum because we were over in Knoxville for a friend's wedding, and I wandered over there, and Neil was there, and He did something he doesn't do very often. Let me get up in the airplane and sit in it again.
Ooh.
Oh, I could not believe how small it was. I couldn't believe what an antique it was. I'd forgotten all this stuff. And so he was cautious about, but
Of course.
And so then I wanted to do Jim Wold Day, and before that he had an event, and he asked if Mel Swanson came. I was there. Jax Roberts was there, and another pilot, I can't remember his name. It just happened to be there that flew A1s before I was over there. I didn't know him.
Yeah.
He was there to see the A1 because Neil flies his airplane for us and has numerous times.
Oh, yeah.
And it is the most purest. It's just like it was when it was flown out by Roger Youngblood. And
still leaking oil and other vital fluids from the aircraft all over.
His is pretty clean, but it's just absolutely perfect.
It's like the King Bees.
Yeah.
They leak body fluids too.
Yep. And so Neil had us. He asked us if we would speak at the four of us, actually three of us, and then we invited the other guy to come too.
Sure.
And I'm thinking his head was spinning. And, of course, Mel Swanson. He's very animated.
Oh, yeah.
And I was watching this, and he's talking, and we were talking, and I happened to spot this lady who was pretty attractive, I might add. And I'm watching her, and she is her radar, she's just tuned into this Mel. It's making her laugh and everything. And Neil's out there to watch us and hope that we don't say things that'll upset him.
Right.
Or anybody.
Or not be PC.
And after the meeting was over, a whole bunch of people got up and left real quickly. And I was, maybe this didn't go very well.
Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of other people started coming forward with us. And they wanted us to autograph things. And most
from the store?
From that they had with it, the ones that books they had or whatever they happened to have. Piece of paper, whatever. The ones that had run back into most of them that were leaving went to the gift shop and bought things and then came and wanted us to autograph. So it was Neil saw that, and then I guess he trusted us, and it's been good. I hope for him. I know that having that airplane so pure in form, there are only four of them that
still fly today.
That fly. Well, there's some that fly that aren't whole. They aren't like it was when we flew them. And there's one in a museum that's never going to fly, and one out in Colorado that's a fat face that didn't fly. It flew Vietnamese, but not us in training. So there's really only two airplanes that are available that could fly, and Neil flies his consistently.
He's so cool.
He just got did annual on it, and he's going to start flying it again pretty soon, I think.
An annual maintenance.
Yes, and that's a big job.
Oh,
and you ask about the airplane. The engine in the airplane was essentially the same engine that was in a B-29 bomber.
Whoa.
One engine. There was one other airplane
that rotary engine.
Old-fashioned. Now, fortunately, they made improvements because we had to take Iwo Jima because of all the failures of the engines on the Wright 3350s in the earlier versions of them.
Right.
And they improved them. But we were flying airplanes where parts were getting limited, or at the bottom of the parts barrel.
Even in 1970.
Yes.
Yes.
And they told us to fly the airplanes with full rich, regular, not lean them out because that's harder on the engines. We had some engine failures. And the other thing about the Skyraider that should be told is it had an extractor system. We didn't have to bail out over the side. Ejection seats would be ballistic charges, and it's like a rocket. You just blast it out of the airplane.
Yeah, like
you stay in the seat.
Right.
And then the seat, it helps you slow down so that you don't flail around so much and rip your arms off or whatever.
Sure.
The extractor in a slow mover was a think a 16 or 14 foot long tether, basically a nylon strap, and it was fired. A rocket had to come. You would have to unstrap from your seat, not your parachute.
Right.
Which was all you have to do to get out of the plane because you sat on your parachute, and that caused some issues. And then it could be gyro stabilized, and it could extract you. And it was our own body mass and the speeds of that we would likely be flying wasn't going to rip our arms off and everything. It wasn't going to be comfortable, but you just
different than a Phantom jet going 400 or 500 miles an hour.
And you weren't with the seat. The rocket pulled you out.
Yeah.
And they saved a lot of lives. They were complicated. There were some issues, failures as well. And then we could carry as much as a B-17 bomber in total payload.
Get out.
Yes. And so that is why they had this. So we had all these combinations. We could have rockets. We could have CBUs. We could have napalm. We could have hard bombs. We could have thermite rod bombs that they dropped on the trail. To me, bombing trucks was not something I wanted to die for, and it wasn't. And my best friend was killed when he was out doing that.
Oh my God!
That I trained with in pilot training. The other guy that got an A1, and we became very good friends. We didn't know each other much before then. So this was a very dangerous, very rewarding mission. And we gave, in Ola, I can absolutely guarantee you that the SOG guys were every bit as important to give the best we could as any downed pilot. That's how I felt about it. Others may differ, but they don't know you guys. I know you guys.
Well, we've had those reunions over the years. Again, thanks to Neil and his offering up his fine facility at the museum in Sevierville there. And we've had the reunions. First was yours, and then we went out, and then we had the Jim Wall Day. Then sadly we lost Mel Swanson, and we had a Mel Swanson Day.
Yep.
And then we had the Operation Tailwind gathering, which was before we lost Mel.
Yeah.
And so we've had some memorial moments, and then now you all are members of the Special Operations Association, and we get to spend a little time chewing the fat at the reunions, and it's been great.
I am so honored and proud, and I'll say this and get myself in trouble. You guys are so much better organized. Your reunions are so much, I've never seen, and Mel Swanson said this too, in all his time, he never saw any sort of organized event like your reunions are, SOAR, ever. He just couldn't believe how organized and disciplined you guys were and all,
Yeah.
And so I'll let it go at that, but
and we're at that point in the show
fest
here. Thank you. We're wrapping up. Is there any other final thoughts before we close out today?
I want to thank you for doing this.
And Jocko.
Definitely. And I want to tell you that I am, to be the first one, I am so honored that I can't adequately explain it. But I was honored before. I fell in love with what you guys were and did. And so many of you are so successful. You would think the opinions that people might have about Army guys, the things that you did, I can tell you, you are some of the best organized and most wonderful people I've ever met. One quick thing we noticed when I had the honor to go out there and I made this big banner, we would see guys walking around our table, and then they would act like they'd come forward, and then they would
back
off. And I wasn't quick at seeing that. Jax Roberts said, they're afraid to come up to us. They don't want to cry in front of us. And he said, we need to go to them. And so we went to a table with Nick Brockhausen and the Samoan
Jim Wheeler.
Jim Wheeler. My God, we were laughing so hard. Even Linda was there. We were rolling on the floor laughing out loud. Those guys are fun and crazy.
Oh, they're crazy.
And just and so it's made my research and all the work that Linda did for me came back in spades that we finally got out there. And I want to thank Robert No for sending that email. I might never have got past that.
Right.
And here I are.
Indeed. And Robert's website, which has all the, it chronicles the SOG, KIAs, MIAs, it's macvsog.cc. That's all it is. And you could Google in there. So, again, there's a mutual admiration society here. Many of us are alive today thanks to you all. And that's why I wish we had done it earlier, but we did it finally, and we learned your stories, and today we're honored to bring it out to our listeners. So we're at that point in time. We want to thank all the men and women who are out there today defending our country, and to the Armed Services member who have fought and bled for this country, men like Air Force First Lieutenant Don Engebretsen. We also remember and salute the men and women who didn't return home from battlefields far away. Today, there are 1,579 Americans still listed as missing in action from the Vietnam War throughout Southeast Asia, including 50 Green Berets from the Secret War and at least 83 aviators who died supporting SOG teams on the ground. We also thank the U.S. Border Patrol, all law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, EMT, prison personnel, for all they do for our country today. And please take a moment to look at my website, www.SOG Chronicles, and previous SOGcast interviews that are up on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Again, we thank Jocko Willing for sponsoring SOGcast interviews, productions, and flight costs. You can check out Jocko's website, Jocko Underground, Echelon Front, and for consulting his kid books and extreme ownership. God bless America.